Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be talking about something that's been all over the news lately, the TikTok ban here in the U.S. It finally happened, went into effect January 19th, 2025.
Yeah.
Everyone thought it was over. TikTok went dark. And then, out of nowhere, President-elect Trump says he wants to keep it.
It's definitely a wild situation, a lot going on, so many different issues at play. Legal battles, national security concerns, free speech debates.
Yeah, not to mention just what it means for millions of people who use TikTok.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
mean, we've got all this stuff here in front of us, court documents, news articles, opinions from experts. I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed myself.
Right.
Where do we even start to make sense of all of this? What's at the core of this controversy?
I think to really understand why the U.S. government wants to ban TikTok, we have to look at the company that owns it, ByteDance, which is based in China.
Okay.
The concern, and it's not just the U.S. that's worried about this, is that the Chinese government could get access to data from TikTok users.
So it all comes down to national security. But is that really a valid concern? I mean, hasn't TikTok always said they wouldn't share user data with the Chinese government?
They have, yes, but the U.S. government points to a law called the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary-Controlled Applications Act,
Oh, yeah.
which President Biden actually signed back in 2024.
Mhm.
This act basically gives the government the power to restrict or even ban apps that are controlled by foreign adversaries if they pose a national security risk.
So this law isn't specifically about TikTok. It's more of a broader tool that the government can use.
Right.
For any app that they think might be a problem, coming from a foreign country, that seems like a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
It sounds like it gives them a lot of power.
It does, and that's exactly what TikTok and some of its users argued when they challenged this ban in court. They said it violated the First Amendment,
Oh, interesting.
specifically the right to free speech, and this case went all the way to the Supreme Court.
So what happened to the Supreme Court? Did they side with TikTok?
Not really. They actually signaled they were probably going to uphold the ban.
Mm-hmm.
The national security argument seems to be carrying a lot of weight with them.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So things were looking pretty bad for TikTok. January 19th rolls around, and as expected, TikTok goes dark in the U.S.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what that must have felt like for its users, like a digital earthquake.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge part of, so many people's lives.
Right.
But then President-elect Trump comes in and throws a wrench in everything. I mean, wasn't he the one who first tried to ban TikTok when he was president before?
He did. It is quite a turnaround, and I think everyone's noticed the irony.
Yeah.
His earlier attempts to ban TikTok failed because there wasn't really a strong legal basis for it at the time.
Yeah, right.
But now he's suggesting he can find a political resolution to this whole thing.
A political resolution. What does that even mean?
It's kind of vague, yeah. There are a few different things he could do. He could try to delay the ban through executive orders.
Mhm.
Maybe he could pressure ByteDance to sell TikTok to an American company.
Right. So get rid of that Chinese threat.
Exactly. There's even been some talk of him trying to get Congress to change the existing laws.
Wow. So he's got options. But why the sudden change of heart? What do you think's motivating him to keep TikTok around?
Well, there's a lot of speculation. Some people say it's political. He used TikTok a lot during his campaign, and it seemed to work really well for him.
Yeah.
Others think he just wants to, show that he's in charge when it comes to tech policy.
Right.
Honestly, his real motives are a bit of a mystery at this point.
Yeah, and this really throws a wrench into everything. The ban is in place, but TikTok's back online because Trump wants it that way. It's all very confusing. So what happens now?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
The future of TikTok in the U.S. is completely up in the air.
Okay, so let's break this down. We've got this legal battle going on.
Right.
We've got the president-elect making surprise moves. And of course, we can't forget the millions of TikTok users who are caught in the middle of all this.
Yeah.
It's definitely a recipe for chaos. And we haven't even touched on what this means for the people whose lives are directly tied to TikTok.
Right.
We should definitely talk about that too.
Absolutely.
But first, let's dive a little deeper into the legal side of things and explore the possible outcomes.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I think it's safe to say that TikTok and its users are going to keep fighting this ban in court. They'll probably try to argue that it's unconstitutional.
Yeah, but isn't that going to be a tough sell?
Yes.
I mean, especially since the Supreme Court seems pretty set on supporting the ban.
It definitely won't be easy, but it's still a possibility.
Yeah.
Another scenario we could see is it really all depends on what President-elect Trump does.
Right.
If he's serious about finding a political resolution, he might put some pressure on ByteDance to sell TikTok to an American company.
Okay, so that would get rid of the national security issue, and maybe TikTok could just operate like normal here.
Exactly. But what if a sale doesn't happen? Or if Trump just, I don't know, changes his mind about the whole thing?
Good point.
Then I think we could see TikTok in the U.S. slowly kind of fade away.
Really?
No new users, no updates. The app would get more and more outdated, and people would probably just move on to other platforms.
So it'll be like a digital ghost town.
Yeah, kind of.
Sort of sad when you think about it, all those people.
It is, and that's what brings us to, the human side of all this.
Right, right.
Which I think sometimes gets lost in all the legal and political stuff.
Yeah.
Imagine you're someone who's built their whole career on TikTok.
Right.
You've put so much time and energy into building an audience, building a brand.
Yeah, it's their livelihood. And suddenly, it could all be gone.
Exactly.
What are all these TikTok creators doing? I mean, how are they coping with this uncertainty?
Well, a lot of them are trying to establish themselves on other platforms,
Right.
like Instagram, YouTube, trying to diversify so they don't have all their eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Makes sense.
But it's going to be tough.
Yeah, it's like they're being forced to start their careers all over again from scratch. I imagine there are a lot of people who are feeling pretty anxious, maybe even angry.
Oh, definitely. They feel like they've been betrayed, TikTok wasn't just an app for them. It was like a community.
Creative outlet. Yeah.
Exactly. And this ban just disrupts all of that.
Yeah, they have to adapt. They have to find new ways to connect with their audience.
Right.
I guess it just goes to show you can't build your whole career on something you don't control.
It's a tough lesson to learn.
It is.
And we can't forget about all the regular people who use TikTok.
Right. The millions of everyday users.
Right. For them, it's entertainment. It's a way to connect with friends and family. It's even a creative outlet for some people.
It's part of their daily lives. And now there's this possibility that it could all be taken away. I can see why there's so much debate about this ban.
Yeah, the sources we've been looking at show there are really strong opinions on both sides.
So some people are all for the ban.
Yeah, they say national security has to come first, even if it means losing an app.
So they believe the risks are just too big to ignore.
Exactly. But then you have other people who think this ban is going too far. They say it's like an attack on their freedom of speech.
That it sets a bad precedent for online censorship.
Right. They're worried about the government having too much control over what we can see and do online. And there are good points on both sides.
This whole thing really gets to the heart of, this tension that exists between individual rights and national security.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like TikTok has become a symbol of that struggle.
It has, in a way.
So where do we go from here? I mean, what's next?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? Nobody really knows. There are still so many legal battles ahead, and of course the political side of things is really unpredictable.
Okay, so we've got this complex legal situation. We've got a president-elect who's throwing a wrench into everything.
Right.
And we have millions of people who are just trying to figure out what's going to happen to the app they love.
Yeah, it's a mess.
It really is.
Yeah.
But this TikTok story is about so much more than just one app, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
This whole situation brings up so many important questions about data privacy, online freedom, and the power of tech companies.
It does. It really makes you think. And I think this whole thing has been a real eye-opener.
It has for me, too.
The TikTok ban has given us a lot to think about.
It really has. So let's try to sum up what we've learned. What are the key takeaways from this deep dive? What can our listeners walk away with?
I think if anything's clear from this whole TikTok situation, it's that the digital world and the real world, they're not separate anymore.
Yeah.
Everything's so intertwined, politics, our lives, national security, it's all connected. Absolutely. This case really shows how decisions that are made online can have huge consequences in the real world.
And we're not even just talking about the people who use and create content on TikTok, This whole thing, it makes you ask bigger questions.
Right.
About how governments should be regulating technology. Like, where do you draw the line between security and individual freedoms in this digital age?
It's a lot to consider.
And what about the power these big tech companies have? I mean, they have so much influence over our lives.
It's true. It really is a wake-up call. We need to think more carefully about the choices we make online.
Yeah.
And how those choices might affect us down the road.
We always hear about the internet as this force for good. It connects people, it gives individuals a voice. But the TikTok ban, it shows the other side of that, right?
It does. It shows how Governments and big corporations can actually control a lot of what happens online,
Right.
which affects millions of people. It's not really this completely free and open space like we sometimes think it is.
And this isn't just a U.S. issue either, right? Other countries are doing the same thing. Like India, they banned TikTok a while back.
Yeah.
I bet we're going to see more of this happening, more countries trying to figure out how to deal with these uh, international tech companies.
Yeah, I think so too.
It feels like this whole thing is setting a precedent, like a new standard.
It is.
And it could have a huge impact on how the internet is governed in the future.
For sure.
It's almost like we're at this turning point, and TikTok is right at the center of it.
It is pretty amazing how this one app has become so central to these massive issues.
Yeah, like a symbol of something much bigger.
Right.
This whole thing's still playing out. We don't know how it's going to end. But this deep dive, it's been really eye-opening, I gotta say.
It has, yeah. The TikTok ban has definitely given us a lot to think about.
Yeah, it really has. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about.
Okay.
Imagine that you're a TikTok creator or just someone who uses the app all the time.
Yeah.
What would you do? Would you fight to get TikTok back? Would you try to move to a different platform? Would you just accept it and move on?
It's a tough question. There's no easy answer.
No, there isn't. But I think by trying to see this from their perspective, from the people who are directly affected by this, it helps us understand how complicated this issue really is.
Yeah.
It's not just about the headlines and the politics. It's about real people's lives.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're all about here, encouraging people to think critically, to have empathy, to understand different points of view,
Right.
to empower people so they can navigate this crazy digital world we live in.
Well said.
So until next time, keep diving deep, keep asking questions, and keep the conversation going.